Hello everybody. Today we are going to look at an interesting feature which is introduced as part of the JDK 8 and which is evolved in JDK 9 and subsequent versions. It is optional. Optional is a class type which was introduced in JDK 8, and the primary reason for introducing this optional is that we in Java, right from the start, we were dealing with null pointer exceptions, wherein before performing any operations on a particular object, in general we perform the null checks in order to check whether the object is a null or has an or the reference has the object pointing towards. So before doing any operations, we normally perform those checks in the code. However, this involves a lot of code that is written in each and every place wherever an object will be is being used. So there is a lot of redundant code for null checks which will be introduced despite checking it at the higher levels in the call stack. So in order to avoid that, and to ensure that we have an we perform whether a particular object that is expected to be null, and if it is expected to be null, what is the default value that will be assigned, or if it is not supposed to be null, then if we have to throw some exception, then accordingly we can throw the exception, and subsequently to handle the operations as needed. Optional is introduced, wherein optional has quite a few methods in it, so which can be utilized. For example, a simple check of whether it is an empty or not. Okay. um, Empty method which returns an empty optional. Similarly, a filter method, flat map method, a get method which will return the object if the object is already present and it is a not null. Similarly, there are quite a lot of other methods like if present, or else. The difference between the two is if present checks if the value is present, and then it will if it is present, then it will perform the subsequent consumer action that needs to be performed on it. And if at all if it is not present, then there is there is an action, there is an alternate action which needs to be performed, so which we will do is which we can provide as part of the if present or else. Similarly, we can check whether an optional is empty or not by using the is empty, and similarly whether it is present or not using the is present. Okay, and subsequently there are off method, off nullable, or if as an alternative, if the value doesn't exist, then what how we subsequent functions which can uh, create the methods or provide the provide the appropriate objects and return the same. Similarly, there is or else get, and if these two if the optional doesn't has any value in it, then we can provide an alternative value which will be returned, which is of the same type as the as mentioned in the optional. Similarly, or else get also helps in the same fashion. However, in the or else get, it is a supplier function which we are going to use as part of the call stack, so that this supplier is invoked and the subsequent data out of that supplier is returned. So similarly, if the data is not present in the optional, we are going to use or else throw, and if we want to throw a specific exception, then we will use or else throw with a supplier which returns the exception. So similarly, we have the stream as well. We can even apply stream on it and perform some operations out of it. So this stream is primarily useful when we are going to use a list or a collection, so that we can do a null check on the collection, and then subsequently we can perform operations on each of the value in that. Okay, so let us just go. So this is the optional class. So this has only a limited set of methods, but these methods are sufficient enough to do all those null checks and perform the subsequent action with as less amount of code as possible. So let's go to the demo. So this is the optional demo that we have written. Okay, so this demo we have written keeping in mind to demonstrate how we can utilize the optional. Okay, so if we see here, so there is a demo method which is written. So I'll just comment out the demo first. So if we see in the code, let us say there is a string name, okay, which is being assigned a stringified null. So null, even though it is null value, it is a string. So we are assigning it to a string variable, and we need to we need to display the length of the, let me just comment this out. We need to display the length of this particular string parameter. So if we have to perform the length check or display generate the length of it, one thing is, first we need to check whether the parameter is null or not, and if it is not null, then we will calculate the length, and if it is null, then we will just default it to length 0, and then we will display the value. Let us just run this through. Okay, if we see the length of the name is 4. Similarly, if we just assign, sorry, null and run it, we can see that the length is defaulted to 0, right? So this is the case. So now if we see here, there are quite a lot of lines that we need to write, and in the call stack, each and every instruction occupies a single step in the call stack, right? So if we see, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So just to display the length of a string variable, we had to write 5 lines in it, and then the sixth line will display it. Now, if at all we do not want to write these many number of lines and use an optional, okay, so here we are writing everything in one single statement. Okay, so even though it is mentioned in multiple statements, this corresponds to a single call. Okay, now let us just run this and check what will be the output first. So if we can see, the output is length of the name is 0. Why is the length of name 0? Because here we are doing a check. If the name is null, then in the we are using an optional wherein we are checking if the name is not null, then we have to map to calculate the length of the string and then return the same. Okay, if the name is null, then we are defaulting it to 0. Okay, so now let us say, let's just change this from null to my name, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 characters. Let us just run this and see what will be the length of it. If you see, the length of the name is mentioned as 7. So since the name is present, the value in the name is present. Okay, so it's a valid string. So it has invoked the string length, and the result of that string length is returned, which is displayed as part of the string. Length of the name is string. Length of the name is 7. Okay, so in this way, the number of lines of code that we need to write in order to validate or process some data, okay, some data which could be nullable, okay, so will help us in reducing the number of null pointer exceptions and in handling the code in a graceful manner. Okay, so let us see what are the various methods that we could use in here. Okay, so if we see here, the first one is the optional dot off. So this optional dot off is a method where it will check whether the string that is mentioned here is null or not. And if it is a null string, if it is a non-null string, then it will just go ahead and display it. And if it is a null string, str, just a moment. And let me just comment out the rest. Okay, So if we see here, let us just first run this tree, run this code. Sorry. Just comment this out. So if you see here, if the string that is passed to the optional dot off is a not nullable, non-nullable string, then it returns the string object. And since we are doing the string object, it uses a dot to string, and then it displays the value of it. Okay. Now let us just convert this to null. Okay. So if we see here, right, uh, the off expects a non-nullable string, and if it receives a string which is nullable, then it throws a null pointer exception straight away. So the implementation, if we see, it requires a value which is non-nullable, non-null. So if it is nullable, then it will if it is null, then it will throw a null pointer exception as shown here. Okay. Let me revert this. So let us say in the scenarios where we do not expect a null value, okay, we can use this optional dot off to perform the operation. Okay. So let me just, okay. Now similarly we have, let us say if we are expecting a parameter which could be null. Okay. So in such a scenario, we will use the off nullable method, which will yeah. So if we see here, so off nullable expects the parameter that is passed to it to be nullable, and in such a scenario, it will just return an empty empty. Okay. However, if we provide it a proper str, proper string, okay, which is not nullable, okay, sorry, which is not null, then it will return the optional object with the string value. Okay. So if we look at the implementation of the off nullable, we can see here if the value that is passed is null, then it will return an empty optional. Otherwise, it will wrap the optional around. It will create an optional object with the value, with the passed value, and it will return. Okay. So similarly, okay, you can see the get method as well. Okay. So the get method, if we see here, the get method straight away returns whatever data is present in that particular string. Okay. However, if we see, and if the yeah, if at all, okay, if at all we are using an empty string wherein the content of the optional is null, okay, in such a scenario, it will throw a null pointer exception. So get works similar to the off, wherein similar both these methods do not expect the value or value that is passed to the off, and the value and the contents of the optional object to be not null. So for example, in the get method, it expects the param value to be not null. Otherwise, it will throw an exception of no such element exception. So rather than a null pointer exception, it throws a no such element exception because, yeah, since it doesn't know the type, it doesn't want to infer something out of the type. So it just says that no, the element is not present. Okay. So this is about the get method. Okay. So get and off methods are can be used in the scenarios where we are sure that the optional is not empty, or the object that is passed to the optional to the method optional dot off is not empty. Okay. So only in those scenarios we can use those. In such a manner, if we look at off nullable is the safe method. If we do not know whether a parameter that is going to be passed to the off nullable is nullable also, it can be null. In such a scenario, off nullable can be used, which is a safe parameter. Okay, so if we see here, we have another method is present. Okay, so it will check whether the parameter, whether the data in the um, optional is present or not. Okay, so if we invoke this, so if we see here, it is saying that the optional is present. Okay, is present. So since in the opt string we have assigned a new string, welcome to optional of demo, so the string is present, so it will return true. However, if we look at it, if we change it to empty, for example, let's not go with the optional, let's go with the empty. If we reassign it to empty, then it is throwing, then it is returning false. Okay, so that means the optional is not present. So this will be helpful in determining whether the data is present in the optional or not. Okay, similarly, is empty will let us know whether the optional is empty or not. Okay, so is empty and is present, more or less both of them work in a similar fashion. However, is empty tells us whether the value that is held in the optional is null or not. Okay, that means both are exclusive. So if is empty is true, that means is present is false, and whereas is present is true, then is empty will be false. So vice versa. Okay. Similarly, we have if present. For example, if at all the data is present in the optional and we want to perform some operations out of on that. So in such a scenario, we can use if present method of optional. Okay, so here we are saying if optional dot off, we are creating a parameter optional, and then we are saying if it is present, then we want to display the data out of it. Okay, so here we are displaying the data. Okay, so so if only when the data is present, it will invoke the consumer function that is mentioned in here. Okay, so now if present, if at all the data is not present in it, then what are we going to do? Okay, in such a scenario, for example, in here we can see that the day for example, the opt string, the data is already is assigned at the top, welcome to optional dot off demo. Okay, so if we run this code, we can see that we are converting that entire data into the lowercase, and we have converted it into lowercase and then assigned it. So this particular section of the code is invoked, which is a consumer, right? Now, if we make it empty, let us say the data is not present in it. Okay, in such a scenario, this particular string of welcome to optional dot if present or else demo needs to be invoked. Okay, see, if we see, this particular section of the code is invoked. Okay, so if we look at the implementation of the if present or else, we can see that the the action will be accepted only when we have the value present in it. That means we, if we need to perform some single transformation operation or consumer operation on the data when it is present, then we can use this if present or if present and if present or else. Okay, in the scenario of a value could be null, in such a scenario, if we want to perform some operation, okay, as some default operation, some to retrieve the data from the database or to generate some data out of it. In such a scenario, we can provide an alternative method, okay, which supplier function or a consumer alternative method, which will be invoked in performing the operation. Okay, so this is about if present or else. Okay, so similar to so this is nothing but uh, operation, simple filter operation. And here, if we look at it, we are running the string through, and we are first verifying whether the string present in the optional contains a string named filter or not. And if it is not filtered, then it will go for or else. Otherwise, it will display the same data. So let us just run this. So if we see here, the string, the opt string that we have mentioned that is being used here doesn't contain a filter. So it has displayed the alternative string of it's not a filter demo. Okay. However, if we enable this string, if you see here, the welcome to optional dot filter demo, in this the filter string is present. So here, if we run this, okay, so the filter has to allow this value, okay, to be passed on, wherein it will be displayed in the print method. So let us just run this. So if we see here, earlier we were saying that it is not a filter demo string. Now if we see here, since the filter is present, so filter string is present in the optional value, and the filter found that the filter is present in the string, so it allowed, and the data is displayed here. Okay, so let us go to the next method. Next method is an flat map, uh, which is a normal operation that we perform. For example, here we are first displaying the string, and then we are converting the strings and reducing the number of lines into one single line. Okay, so let us just run this. So if you see here, initially the value is displayed in multiple lines. Now we have reduced the number of lines to one single line, okay, by adding a simple space. So here, welcome and two optional dot flat map demo were displayed in a separate lines, and here it is displayed in single line. So flat map, as we mentioned, it performs a transformation wherein reducing the number of number of multiple levels of data into one single map, one single data. So yeah, this is the flat map. Okay. Now, if we look at the map is the regular mapper function which is performed where we will look at we will first identify the number of words in the string, okay, by using the simple space character. So let us just run this. So if we see here, we are saying that there are four words, because our condition in identifying the words is if two set of characters are separated by a space, then we will consider them to be two separate strings. So if we see here, welcome is one string, one word. Sorry, welcome is one word, two is one word, and optional dot map is considered one single word because there is no space in between, and demo is considered another word. So if you see here, as following that, we have got the number of strings here. Okay, so so here we can use uh, either if present or else, or we can use a mapper in here. Okay, so we can use either of this here. Okay, so mapper does a similar operation of taking in a function, and when the data is not empty, then it will help in applying the function on the value. Okay, similarly, if we look at the if present, okay, if present is a consumer function, whereas if at all there is an output out of that mapper which needs to be provided to the for the subsequent operations downstream, then we will use the mapper functions. Okay, otherwise even the if present is sufficient enough in Okay, so if present will just display the number of words, but yeah, if we have to pass on the data to the subsequent downstream, yes, we need to use mapper functions. Okay, so we even have a, feasibility to use the streams. Okay, here we are converting the string into a stream by by splitting the space and creating a list of words, and we are passing through the stream, and we are converting this address of stream, and we are displaying it here. Okay, so let us just run this through. So here we have converted that into stream, and then into a simple list, and then we are displaying the each and every word in here. Okay, so stream is useful in here. I'll make a separate video especially for stream. Okay, so here this is enough. So similarly, or else get, all these three are similar functions. Okay, so here if we look at it, if the string is sorry, if the data in the optional is empty, then the or is invoked, which will say it, which will run this function, and it will return the value. Similarly, if it is or else, we are going to provide the object which will or data which will be displayed. Okay, similarly, or else get takes an function, supplier function, I guess. Yeah, it's a supplier function, and if the optional doesn't has a value, and that supplier function returns the value which will be used for the operations. So let us just run this through. So if you see here, first optional dot off, so it is empty, is returned. Okay, because it's an or function. Okay, so here supplier function, where it will just supply the data that is required, or a default value, or if we need to perform some operations to generate the data and return, we can use this or function. Okay, similarly if we see or else, it will just return the object, alternate or default object, which needs to be sent back in case the optional is empty. Okay, so similarly, if we look at the or else get takes in a supplier function, as we saw already. So this supplier function is invoked, and and the data that is returned out of that supplier is passed on to the subsequent stream. So let us see what will be here. Yeah. So if we see here, since the optional has some value, so optional dot or returns the actual optional object because the data is already present in that optional object. Similarly, it will return the value out of it because it's present. Otherwise, it will give an alternate value. And similarly, it will return the value and then does not invoke the or else get because the data is already present in the option. Okay, so this is how option or else, and or else get work. All three are similar functions, but the difference is only in the way we are going to address the emptiness or unavailability of the object in the optional. In one case, we will use a supplier function, and in the other cases we use in the other case we use an object. Okay, and in another case, let me just check. Yeah, in another case also we are using a supplier function. So in both the cases we will use a supplier function, and in one case we will use an alternate default object. However, in the or method, we expect it to be non-null. Okay, so if the we expect the supplier to be non-null because since the when the data is not present in the optional, we have to invoke this supplier and return the data. So this cannot be null. Okay. Coming to the next one, we have this or else throw. Okay, so or else throw, since the string is not empty, it's not throwing anything. Let us just try empty. Okay, so So the first one threw in no such element exception. Okay, so that's the case.